any wargame, anytime.
Hello, everybody. This is Sam from the Any War Games Anytime podcast. I am joined here by my friend Dan and our friend Justin, who is a player we know from Kings of War. And we introduced him to OPR this last week. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Age of Fantasy Regiments today. But go ahead and Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, doing great. Boz can't be with us today. He'd love to be with her, but we all have to actually work for a living. We can't just do this full time. So
Yes, we are not quite at the level of our of professionalism where we can quit our day jobs. So
probably never will be. But I'm doing great, doing great.
Right. And Justin, tell us a little about yourself. Me and Dan obviously know you, but how you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been playing. I started playing Warhammer in like the late '90s, in 5th edition, probably around the time that came out. The Lizard Man player, and transitioned over to Kings of War, kind of in the end times, and now I'm playing a little bit of a bunch of stuff. Just playing around. I was actually introduced to one-page rules through my mini factory, just looking for stuff to 3D print when I got my 3D printer, and probably like Facebook ads and stuff got me there. Just somehow they knew I was a Lizardman player, and right, so I'm just seeing all these cool Lizardman stuff, and it's what got me that. The model from from a playthrough, it was the first one I got, I think. And then I'm like, oh, they've got rules too.
They
An awesome model, yeah.
They really do have some really good Lizardman sculpts for OPR. But anyway, we wanted to talk today about Age of Fantasy Regiments and some ideas that we've had as kind of a result of the games that we've played of Age of Fantasy Regiments, as well as our experience in other systems, and what we'd like to see, how kind of we'd like to see the game develop further, and we're going to go over some points, and let's get right into it. So the first thing on the agenda we're going to talk about is ambush.
Mm-hmm.
Ambush is a rule that we've had a lot of. So we've had some outside of the podcast. We've had some contentious back and forth between me and Dan about its kind of place in Age of Fantasy Regiments, and it seems very much like a rule that's more designed for Grimdark and for any kind of skirmish game. And in a regiment system, it kind of has some problems, and so let's kind of break that down a little bit. Do you want to do that for us, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my thought on it. And to me, I think that it's possible that ambush could be balanced. And I think that we would have to. I think it could be balanced. I think that certain armies like Damon's, basically, you couldn't have army-wide ambush. I think for me, it's a little bit more of just the philosophical meaning of the game. Regiments is sort of meant to be a game that you sort of set up, and the setup is very important, and then you move forward, and there's all that's like that is sort of how, at least for me personally, that I envision a regiments game. That I always sort of feel ambush doesn't, like, the mechanic itself doesn't feel like it should be in the game for me. Yeah.
Yeah, in a rank and flank kind of tactic setting, right? And that's kind of what we're really into here is that rank and flanks.
Yeah, I like ambush, and to be clear, we play the other games. We play Age of Fantasy, and I play Grimdark. I like ambush there. I don't have a particular problem with it. I just don't know if it's a rank and flank type of ability. Yeah.
I wonder. So we talked a little bit about, like, my interpretation, like fluff wise, of what ambush was different than how Sam described it, and it kind of got me thinking. Where I was thinking of ambush as reinforcements kind of entering the board versus already existing on the board and kind of hiding and popping out and ambushing you, right? It actually makes more sense as a name that way. I wonder if
or demons that like materialize out
right,
of
and so like
from
if you
the
think
ether.
of like what is the feel that it's trying to get, and can that be, can a rule be structured? Or maybe there's different kinds of ambushes. So like if you're thinking of, so for like the demons materializing, right? It's kind of broken in a system where you don't have 360 movement to be able to just appear behind someone. Like there's no chance of ever interacting with you at that point.
Especially with the lust demons getting fast as well, like we were
But like
talking
it
about.
was like, so two things for the demons in my head. I'm thinking is if the first idea I was thinking was like if there was like a line of scrimmage, imagine like you can't ambush past, from your deployment zone, you can't ambush any farther forward than your most front unit or something like that. So like you can't just appear in the backfield, but you have to like you can appear within your battle line. That's like maybe one idea that could like make it not feel totally like weird and broken just coming in behind you. Another like, but for the demons, when I'm like, oh yeah, they're just materializing, right? If they're, instead of like ambush, they're more like the snake swarm ability of the Inclodon in the salamanders or the Saurians, which is like within 6 inches of that, it can spawn
Yeah.
them. So like with the demons,
Yeah.
it's like they can spawn in within 6 inches of another demon unit.
Yeah,
Right. Or maybe
maybe certain terrain pieces. Even you could have a portal or something. I think
right.
that
And
could
that's
be
the thing,
actually
or
interesting.
like with like elves, if they have them, right? You were saying like an elves popping out of the woods. Maybe some of them are, these can ambush from forest. So you don't know if they're in this forest or this forest, but you do at least know
That they're going to be that they have the
They're on a
potential to come
forest.
out of the forest.
You can
Yeah.
move knowing that, well, if I can trigger them, if I can trick them into coming out of that forest, then I know they're not coming out of this forest or something like that.
Yeah, and
So
so
there's just some rules around it instead of
Yeah. It's interesting.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I think from a simplistic, kind of a simplified standpoint, the I've been thinking about this a bit, and one thing you could do to make it much more streamlined for Age of Fantasy is I think most units that have ambush should probably just have scout, because it kind of simulates that same thing in terms of, okay, they were up here, in this woods, or they were up here to be ambushed. So even demons, you have scout, so it's kind of representing that fact that like, okay, you're marching in the army, and then all of a sudden there's demons much closer than we had anticipated, perhaps. And so I think that would be a relatively simple change, and it would still kind of capture the feel of it. You could even then do you could have a distinction that ambush happens after other scouting units. So maybe like, you can even reserve your ambush stuff until your opponent has scouted up, and that would be kind of a possible fix. And I'd like to experiment with that. I'm actually looking at building a ambush heavy army to try and, in one of our test games, run it as if they had scout and see how that works.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I guess I'm used to, I think Games Workshop, hey, got something right with demons where they're like, in 40K, hey, they can appear everywhere and the warp opens up or something, and they call it the demonic assault. I think that OPR, I definitely understand how they want to sort of keep some consistency across both armies, but Games Workshop also just said, "Oh yeah, Damon's just set up like everyone else, in fantasy, right?" I think that that's okay. I mean, for me, I look at like high elf fleets and high elves. High elves don't have fast in every one of the armies because it probably would break an army like regiments if the entire army had fast. And I guess to me, I look at that the same way, that especially for regiments where demons just don't have the daemon ability in regiments. It's just they set up like everyone else. They have reduced points. I also, just for me personally, I actually don't like that they have tied this daemon rule to being a daemon. I wish it was some sort of specialist rule or something. I think that OPR could look at maybe making the rule more generic, where, because now it's like you're almost like they've sort of tied this rule to one particular sort of being, that I feel this is a rule actually that could be on assassins or something like that, right? I don't know.
Yes, you could have either scout or ambush.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
So,
I think you could, and I think OPR, at least in the Army Forge, allows you to do that.
you have to, yeah, you can change it to your
Yeah.
own. Yeah, but yeah, it's some interesting thoughts, and I don't have the answer quite yet.
I would
know.
like to test a ambush heavy army, but kind of do it with the modification that it's just scout, and kind of see if that kind of captures the same spirit that you're trying to get at.
What if, I mean, same idea, and it might just equate the same idea of being scout, but like there's a turn 0 where ambush happens. So you deploy them normally, right? And you
Yeah.
scout. And then if there are ambush units, there's just a turn 0 where all ambush units get to go.
Oh,
Like,
actually,
I don't know, like then they could, they would shoot potentially, like they would just get their move. They would get,
I think I like that. Actually, I actually like that.
they probably can't charge, or you're probably, you would deploy. I guess if someone had scouted up, maybe there would be a charge into a scout thing on like that. But like then you're getting a little more of that ambushy of they might do something.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that then maybe that becomes a bit of a counter game where
Yeah,
scouters are coming up and you have ambushers, which are ambush. That actually feels a lot like, now that feels more rank and flankish, where you sort of have a portion of the army that's sort of getting into this initial battle. Because that actually was a lot in historical warfare, where you did have skirmishers sort of engage early. And it's like you almost had that. It's almost sort of bringing it into sort of that art of war sort of strategy and tactics sort of thing before basically the battle sort of hits. Yeah, I think that's actually
the skirmishers go in and kind of try to break up the line and pick people off and get people to break ranks if they can. That's the ideal. If you're a skirmisher, is they run after you and then they and then you get hit in the flank by cavalry.
I don't know that I would like. I still go back to, I don't know if all an army should have still the daemon rule. I think that giving an entire army the ability to scout is still very strong in rank and flank game, where movement is a little more restricted and you can basically see what your opponent completely does and just be like, oh, I'm gonna go and completely counter you. I don't know. But now that you mention it, I do like that idea, that sort of ambushing turn 0 thing.
I'd like to see that, like, it's like some of the wood elf like sharpshooter type things. I think it'd be good if like they ambush in and they get to shoot immediately, in that kind of turn 0 space or whatever. So like, oh, my army is marching forward and all of a sudden there's arrows firing out of the woods. Okay, well, I guess we gotta turn and face that now.
Yeah,
I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, and tell us, I think, just so y'all know, I mean, we aren't sort of bringing these ideas as some sort of we're very fast and loose with these ideas because we ourselves are still in our experimental phases. So yeah, this is something that, me, Sam, and Justin and others, we're going to be testing, and maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. This is just some ideas that maybe in your own games, if you want to experiment with. Yeah.
And if you've got any ideas in the comments, leave us some comments and maybe we'll give it a try. We all three of us are big kind of rank and flanks tactics people, and we enjoy Age of Fantasy Regiments, but it does need some kind of it does need some work, and and that's what we're here to wildly speculate about and make bold predictions and sweeping changes to this system, right? All about that here. But yeah, like, so moving on from kind of ambush, this also brings up one of the issues that we've kind of noticed in our experiences with Age of Fantasy Regiments, especially coming from Kings of War, is flanking units, and in Kings of War, just briefly for people who don't know, when you hit something in the flank in Kings of War, you double your attacks. So a relatively insignificant unit hits you in the flank can still do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case in Age of Fantasy. And it was kind of an adjustment for all three of us, I think, is we were so conditioned from Kings of War to never reveal flanks. And now in Age of Fantasy, well, first of all, because of you have alternating activations, you have to do that sometimes, and you have to just like, okay, well, the chaff unit hitting my flank is, I'm not going to get to attack back, but it's really still not doing very much.
It's a lot less effective too with the new undead rules. So flanks, I think, were a lot more powerful whenever you could just cause that one wound on those undead, and then they take an undead test immediately. So they've become, I think that was definitely a place for them. They've become a lot less powerful, where basically, especially a lot of undead are getting some higher quality in there, and the new banner changes. Like, it's just sort of, if you have sort of a lighter unit that is just hitting a more heavily armored unit, the heavily armored unit sort of doesn't care, because
Ignores it a little bit.
yeah, they may take a wound or two, but they're just generally going to,
especially if they're high quality as well, or have fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things we were thinking of is, like, would there be ways to make a flanking attack more effective? And we had a couple ideas. So, but one, you could add like a static kind of combat resolution to it. That's one of the ideas. That's kind of in Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. That's what you had is, you would get an extra point of combat resolution.
Didn't you lose your rank bonus too, right? I think
yes, your enemies also lost if you had to have like a certain number, but you
have more.
Yes, you took away their ability to get their rank bonuses.
Although even that might be, I mean, that's enough, right? If you
honestly,
have been flanked, you don't count your ranks when seeing if you win combat.
It's okay.
Enough, yeah.
It's okay. To me, it doesn't feel like, especially as a dwarf player and higher quality players, I think, to me personally, I don't think it's enough, because really there isn't. So, in Age of Fantasy Regiments, you aren't going to have a 40-man plus stack unit back there, right?
Right, you're one or two ranks,
sometimes 4 at most. And even then, it doesn't discount the fact that you have quality 3 fearless units that have banners in them that, are
not going anywhere.
Yeah. And really, if you're hitting on the flank, you're probably going to win combat anyway. So I know we've bounced around some ideas. I think Sam brought up in our discussions AP1 on the flank, and I like that idea. I think all of a sudden now it sort of makes bringing lightly armored skirmisher units that can actually hit flanks. Yeah, they may not kill these units, but giving them an extra AP on the flank actually would sort of serve their purpose, right, Sam? And this is one of your ideas that you sort of sold me on. Yeah, you sort of sold me on it, because I originally was sort of, so Sam brought this up in our discussions. I actually like it. I like getting the +1 AP on the flanks. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, and it sort of makes, for me personally, and I think that I like in Kings of War, is in a rank and flank sort of game, for me personally, having flanks really matter is a big deal, right? Because I know we've played some games. Me and Justin played the last game when I was just like, oh, I'm going to give my rear to these skinks because I don't care, because these are long beards. They've got quality 3 and fearless. And yeah, you may kill some, but I don't care.
And defense 2.
No, they were defense 4. But
you had enough defense. You had enough defense too. Things.
Yeah. Well, dwarves are good. Yeah, we won't. But Sam did. I like, me personally, I do like the +1 AP. I think that's pretty cool.
And it makes sense too, right? You're getting hit out of your formation, out of your shield wall, right? I mean, it's like you're more likely to. I mean, this is how armor is designed too, right? I mean, and armor and shield, right? Like your armor is going to has the most protection in the areas most likely to get hit. If someone gets around behind you, there's going to be more openings than there would be in the front.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, Yeah, I think we're going to try that in our next game. And I think I'm already starting to feel like I haven't played the game yet, but I already sort of feel the tactical weight of that, right? And that makes me already feel better. So,
because you want it to be meaningful, and
yeah.
and because you're trying to emulate in a rank and flanks tactics situation historic infantry tactics, right?
Mhm.
Infantry line tactics of the lines advancing, and a lot of strategy historically in terms of infantry is like finding that point that you're gonna they're out of position, and then you're gonna hit them in the side and break the line. That's an important thing, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of tactics historically are about getting people out of position so that you
Yeah.
can break up their formation. The phalanx of the Macedonians was incredibly powerful until you got uneven terrain and it broke up, and then you could exploit it.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Okay.
I've,
Yeah.
I've, I've of course got to find those moments to bring in my vast repertoire of historic references. This is an important part of this podcast for me. But another kind of thing we wanted to talk about, and I'm glad we have Justin here for this as well, because all three of us come from Kings of War, and one thing that me and Dan have basically done from the get-go since playing Age of Fantasy Regiments is using a movement system that's closer to Kings of War,
Yeah.
where you get one pivot at any point during your move, during a regular move or a charge. You don't get to pivot during a rush. And you can kind of, rather than just having to kind of pivot at the beginning, you can pivot during your move.
Yeah.
And we found that it keeps things from getting kind of too clunky, and you get into situations where your units can still maneuver in the midst of the battle, which is important. Um, and but is there anything other you guys would like to see further with
I
the
mean,
the the movement system in Age of Fantasy Regiments?
yeah, I think like me and Sam, we did play. Remember, we played one game
We
with
did at the very
that
beginning.
old movement system, and it was. I mean, for me,
It
it
was
was
rough.
bad. It was rough,
Yeah, it was not
and
good.
it. I generally like. Kings of War. I think we could. We're not going to get into particular aspects of Kings of War, but I think there. I think it does have some good. Its movement system needs some adjustments, me personally, but we won't get into that. What I will say is that the basic movement system about the chart, one of the things that we really like about the charge system is that you don't all like basically you're not trying to measure your charge in actual inches. You just need to make sure you're in charge range. And then
Yes.
afterwards you can move outside of it. It makes it's much more cleaner. You're not having to sort of and I think that's what Age of Fantasy Regiments is worried about. They're worried about trying to have to figuring out charges, right? In other words, if
Yeah.
they gave you a pivot, the person is going to have to calculate the things on the go. No, you
Don't do
don't.
that. Just
Actually,
check range at the beginning.
and if it's in
Oh,
range
I'm within 12 inches. I can make this charge,
with one pivot, you got
with
it.
one pivot, and then,
Yeah,
and then
and
you
I
can,
think that solves it because I think that's why they are still sticking to this sort of you have to pivot first before you charge is so that the range so you don't have to worry about trying to calculate interstitially. And for my answer to that is ignore it. If it's in range, that's how it works. I think that's a great system. Yeah, like another thing, especially just with it only being a 4-turn game, which we're going to sort of talk about as well, you have to give your units a lot more movement flexibility because it's not fun to just have all your units sort of get clogged up together and then the game ends. Like I
yeah.
think that
Nothing feels worse than having this like super powerful unit in the back of your army that's like you're waiting for them to do something, and then they just never get to actually engage in the game because must unit in front got wavered, and so they were stuck there for like 2 turns doing
mm,
nothing. That's you know
Yeah.
That just removes the fun of the game. And you know, it's if you bring in a unit to the field, you want it to do something. You want it to get in there and smash something. You know, it's otherwise, why did you bring it? Yeah.
I think a little critically, some pieces you left out of the Kings of War movement that are important are that the line of sight for charging.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
in regular one-page rules, you can just turn and charge, right? You don't have to see them. But the fact that if you have to see them first to charge them, that means you do need, there's more positioning to actually be able to make charges you want to get. And
Yeah.
also with the Kings of War terrain rules, where terrain actually blocks line of sight,
Yes.
where you can't like see through a forest, where you could, it's like the forest slows you down in one-page rules, but when you actually can't see through a forest until you're in it, that does add on. Well, now I have to get into the forest. That takes at least one, maybe two turns, and then I have to go through the turn to see or whatever. So you in 4 turns, if you only have 4 moves, if you only want to fight once, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's
And-
right. And
and
then
we've
one
been
fight
like
isn't going to
that.
kill something.
Yeah,
And
I personally like being able to charge on the other side. Me personally, I like especially in regiments, it's not that big of a deal that you can position it. And I think it does sort of speed up the game because honestly, terrain slows down the game enough. I mean, sort of capping that 6-inch move, especially in regiments, really, like me and you played it. We know me and Justin noticed it, right? We had one difficult terrain in the middle of a kill zone, and that shut our units down for an extra turn. It's only a 4-turn game. So
Yeah. Well, and you know, and to point out too, like in OPR does have in the optional rules the terrains already, the terrain system that we've kind of been using with where certain things have certain lines of sight, and you know what units can see over other units and whatnot, and that's it's a pretty easy addition to the game that's does a lot for quality quality of gameplay changes.
yeah.
And we've already kind of touched on this, like the 4-turn in OPR in I think in regiments, yeah, I think we've all kind of been talking about how we would like to see the game go to 5 turns.
Yeah, I think 4 turns is great for Grimdark, especially. Grimdark is a game that, with the long range firepower and the blobbiness of it, 4 turns, I generally feel a lot of the Grimdark games I've played, I don't even need a 5th turn. The game really is decided then because of the long range firepower, the blobbiness, a lot more fast units. It's just, there's a lot more offensive, destructive firepower. Even in Age of Fantasy, I think it actually could go to 5 turns. These games don't have the shooting. They don't have, especially in regiments, I think it has to be 5.
Because you have to have units get into combat, and which means you also have to give time for you know, when you think about it, at least 2 of those turns are going to be the melee. You know, the everything's kind of engaged on the line, breaking through. And if you don't have that extra turn to like, okay, we've had games end where, you know, we kind of clashed at the line and then nothing ever got really resolved. Because like by the time one side or the other broke, there wasn't enough time to actually go, you know, push onto the objectives, or whatnot. And it gives a to high defense, high quality armies, you know, you kind of need if you're either a lower quality army, or a you know, if you have more kind of like berserker type troops, you know, things with lower defense, you need that time to be able to chew through the high defense units. Otherwise, those things are just going to, you know, sit there on the line and never budge.
Yeah, it's a real, and I think that we were talking about this. I don't think the 5th turn is actually going to add a lot of time to the game. Coming from Kings of War and Age and Fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy, part of a rank and flank game is that initial positioning. It's that sort of, and this is what happened historically in warfare, and I like that they mimic it in these games, which is the sort of the edging together. One unit gets a little closer, the other unit gets, and eventually there's a clash. But there's just not like that wasn't how it worked in historical battle. Two units literally ran together, right? And that's really what it feels like sometimes with 4 turns in regiments. You sort of have to just be like, well, I need to get this going. Let me just rush forward blindly. And it's not,
and it also opens, because it opens up if you got faster units, like, okay, I want to sneak around this flank or whatever, and kind of position in your rear. You actually have the time to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it would add a lot to the game. For me, a lot of the game slows down whenever you're rolling dice and picking things. Like the movement in the game to me is super quick. We just move here, move here, move here, move here. And if you add an extra turn of just move here, move here, move here, move here, I don't think with 2 experienced players it's going to really add a lot to the game.
And a turn where you have the least amount of units. Because the 5th turn will have less units than the 1st turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and it also means that you don't necessarily on turn 2 or 3 have to commit everything, because if you've got that extra turn, you might be okay then having, okay, this cavalry unit is going to spend the first 3 turns trying to position around you, and then the last 2 turns, doing damage.
Mm-hmm. And flyers can position better for flanks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely one we want to try out. I'm hoping with the next game we play, we can try that, at least try that one.
Something that Daniel had said, because when we played, you were dwarves, right? Is that like pretty quickly speed stops mattering. Like basically turn 2 on our game, it didn't matter that you were speed 4 and I was regular speed, because we were all within speed 4 range and no one had to move 8 inches. We were within 8 inches of each other. But if you have more turns, you can kind of like go out and around edges, and that speed can actually get you somewhere, versus the game basically starts with you already within that range.
Yeah, and that's kind of been one of the things you and I have talked about, Dan, is slow seems almost too much of a discount.
For me, slow and fast, because I play high elf fleets in Grimdark and I play dwarves in Age of Fantasy. And I will tell you, my high elf fleets really feel a little too expensive. My dwarves honestly feel too cheap. And I would be saying this is probably be nerfing my own army, but dwarves it's what makes dwarves so good, especially in a game. You have to also remember that you're getting speed is, I think this is something that can get fixed. It'll be addressed. I have faith in the OPA basically to say, hey, we've noticed that maybe slow is too much or fast. I think that they can adjust that. And
I think they can, but and our reasoning again is that
it isn't just us. I've noticed other people in the forums bring that up. They're like, and what they do is they don't actually say slow. They say, sometimes I've seen them bring up, Robot Legions feels really powerful. And they sort of guessing, what they don't sort of realize is what I've realized is that, when you have a whole bunch of units that have slow and long range guns,
you're getting a discount.
Yeah.
And not really actually suffering the disadvantage. And so, slow is it's pointed as a discount on all your units, because you're theoretically takes you longer to get to the battlefield. But what as it turns out, because you're already kind of still starting pretty close to each other, and things are already kind of like you end up oftentimes, like, for maybe especially the first turn, it's maybe the turn 1, you feel the slow, but basically after that it's like, okay, things are in range now, it's all good, I'm good, and now I'm basically getting extra value on all my units because they're cheaper, and so
something is off, because the fact that the discount on slow is the same as the point increase on fast shouldn't be the case, right? Slow and fast should not balance each other out, because clearly fast isn't as good as slow is a disadvantage because of difficult terrain. But that's sort of a bigger issue. I think that, but you're right. I think that a 5th turn Justin does bring a good point. A fifth turn, giving movement some breathing room would actually benefit faster and would have a bigger disadvantage on slow armies. Because you actually, all of a sudden now dwarves, the opponent of a dwarf now has more opportunities to sort of surround them and get more of those first turn charges.
Yeah, and make them actually have to deal with their disadvantage, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But but these are some of our some of our thoughts. And again, if any of you listening have some ideas as to things that would think Age of Fantasy Regiments would benefit from, rules you would like us to test, leave a comment. Our aim is to kind of, we enjoy rank and flanks tactics games, and OPR has, as I think me and Dan have both said, and Justin, I think we've got Justin as a new convert, maybe. It's a great, the base of the system is really good, and it has a lot of potential, and that's kind of what we would just like to see where we can go with that potential.
Yeah. And there's a lot. This is not exhaustive. Like, we've really had to sort of trim this down to.
We trimmed this list down because it's like, okay, let's find a couple things that we were pretty sure we can talk about and that we want to test, and but there are plenty of more things, and probably stuff we haven't thought of yet.
That's right.
So any final thoughts, Dan and Justin?
Yeah, I'll echo what you said, Tim. I think that the reason that me and Sam we're talking about this is because we like it. So to be clear, we love the OPR, and to me, I go back to it. They've given us so many tools about creating armies and tweaking things that I think and honestly, I think Regiments to me is much more tactical than Age of Fantasy in the sense of the flanks. I think just a few tweaks and again, me and Sam are also approaching this from a competitive standpoint. If you want to just go have fun, ignore everything we're saying. Perfectly fine, right? You just want to go have a laugh. OPR is a blast.
Yeah, we're not trying to necessarily change what OPR is. We're trying to add options, right? I mean, add some ideas if you would like to be a tournament player, to use this base system as a tournament game.
You just want to have fun. Go have fun. Ignore everything we're saying. Yeah. But yeah, that's it for me.
Justin, you got any closing thoughts with us? And again, thanks for joining us on this.
Yeah, I did enjoy playing. I think I could probably talk for an hour about how to scale points based on speed and other factors. We'll leave that for another time.
And we will
nerd out about the math at various points. That is a given. Privately or on this or on the air, as it were. But I think that again, we've really enjoyed Age of Fantasy Regiments. We're going to keep playing, keep doing more content for all of you. And, again, if you got any ideas that you'd like to see, if you've got lists that you would like to see us kind of do battle reports with, let us know. And, in the meantime, go where the game is good and have a happy gaming.
Happy gaming.
Any war game, anytime.